and it was very difficult to confront a lot of those things. Um, sorry, I think we got disconnected there.
Yes, I was just exchanging to the computer because the computer is the only thing that can record. But I'm here.
Okay, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Yes, so no, I began my journey in 2016, went through quite a lot because in Namibia we're not very familiar with things related to, ubungoma. I mean, here we call it like unganga, which is inyanga, ubunyanga, all of that kind of thing. But I grew up in a family that, and even the society, as we all know, in the society that we grow up in modern times, we don't really have access to information related to African spirituality. And so it became very difficult when I was going through dreams and all of these things related to not being able to sleep, for instance, going to sleep and you're hearing whispers in your ear. And for me, it was a very difficult thing. So my parents thought, obviously, the first conclusion would be that, I'm bewitched and maybe there's someone that's trying to play with me. And it was only then for the first time that they sent me to go and consult with a person here in northern Namibia. And when we went there, it was my aunt that had taken me there. And then the healer, she's Kuku Dimbu, she's quite well versed in these things when it comes to a person being called. And she told my aunt that I was being called. And so later on, she said, obviously, bring your parents with because they need to be told that you're going through this thing. And so when that started, that's what tipped off the journey. So I started initiating in Namibia, and then I had to go to South Africa because there was a lot of difficulty in terms of my parents and how they received this whole news of their child having to go in Twasa, because we don't know of any sangomas in the family, except there were people. By my understanding now, what I know is that there were people, and there still are people on my paternal side of the family who deal with things related to ubungoma. And so I went to South Africa, initiated in 2017, and then I returned, did 9 months there, went through my nguni, and then we did umdao, which is the same thing that happens here, because there really isn't a difference between initiation processes. And so did that, and then went through Siporofeto, and then finished, and then I returned back home. And then from then on, that's when my journey started. Where I am at now has a lot to do with, and that is the reason why we're having this, conversation in the first place, is that there are a lot of people who experienced what I experienced and didn't know which direction to take in terms of, are they going crazy? What are they seeing in their dreams? Can you even share those things with other people? Because a lot of people would assume that these are very they're things related to the mind, obviously, but if you shift those things and place them in a Western format, in a Western system of understanding and communication, then people will say that you're crazy, So there are those fears that we always have, that are we losing our minds and all of that. So the process now has become a thing of my life where I guide people. Right. I guide people and I show them exactly who they are in terms of, and I think that's my highest calling at this point in time, is to explain to people what's happening to them, that they actually aren't crazy. There are certain things that can be shifted into psychiatry, for instance, but then there are just certain things which are deeply African, and the elders know about it. And I think the elders fear speaking up about this. And so that's my role. And that's where I'm at now, is having to align people with who they are and also what their calling and purpose is in life, from which families do they come from, and what those families held in terms of their blood, in terms of their spirit.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, I love your journey. I resonate with it as well, in terms of like difficulties around Africa accessing knowledge on African spirituality. And I think I always tell people from South Africa that, I think it's better in South Africa than in other Southern African countries to access
Oh
information.
yes.
Yeah, so the same was true for me with in Botswana, and for you as well. And I think other people as well can share on that, and that really makes the journey so difficult. And for me, it was a thing of like just doing this, just like, okay, I have to go to this place to get this information and this and this. And this is also why I'm doing this summit. It's essentially to help people access information. And we spoke about this the other day on just the similarities, or at least if you don't know, how you can perceive what we call the ancestral calling sickness or symptoms. And if you are in psychiatry or you are a psychologist, you might call that psychosis or a mental breakdown, which is interesting for me because I come from both worlds, psychology as well as this. And it's like important work that you're doing, because I think that so many people are stuck in this world of trying to understand and trying to figure out, is this real? Is this not real? What does it even mean? So let's take it down and let's try to break it down for everyone who's joining us, who might be going through the same experiences that you are going through, or that I went through, or other speakers have went through. And so we've mentioned Ubungoma, we've mentioned Umdawo, mentioned, now my mind is like losing track of what we mentioned, but like I knew terms for so many people here. So may we begin by what we discovered around all these different elements, and all of this are coming from the Tokwaza tradition, which is the Zulu traditional understanding of African spirituality. So yeah, let's begin there.
So
good.
Okay. Yes. I think for a lot of people, and the reason why we even are having this conversation, it has a lot to do with the one thing that I did realize, and I'm going to make that comparison going back and forth between the time where I was at first of all and where I'm at in this country. What I realize also is that in South Africa, the system that is in South Africa, the very system that initiated me, is the same system that you find here in Namibia. The only difference, I guess, that you'll find is that here in Namibia, because of colonialism, because of a lot of these things that affected us during the time that we were practicing people, during the time that we were people who were self-identified and we had a very sharp sense of identity, it forced a lot of the healers, Namibian healers more specifically, into hiding. So you'll find that a lot of them, and because of the church as well, so they left to the border of Angola, Namibia, which is where I'm at the moment. The way that we do our practices here is no different when you go through Umdao, when you go through Umnguni, because Umnguni essentially deals with your family, deals with where you come from, who your family is, and then most importantly, what are you carrying in your bloodline? So it has to do with the history and the lineage and everything that existed in between there. Things that might have gone wrong, things that need to be rectified. So Umnguni deals with that. And so even here in Namibia, the one thing that has remained that I've noticed but when I started with my training here and there, is that we deal with the same thing, because to be Umnguni for a lot of South Africans, they interpret it as being Zulu. But essentially, how I got to understand it was that Umnguni has a lot to do with being Bantu, because we did not suddenly appear here. We didn't. We came from the northern lands of Africa. And so from that point onwards, I think that's my battery, but I'm going to have to charge. But anyway, so from that point, because we traveled, and even I remember my Gobela having to say that your people were people who were lost. They were finding their way to us, to where we are here in Southern Africa. There was a plan in the beginning that we would travel. And so because of the politics of the African people during that time, we split into different, routes, and then we found ourselves in different countries and all of that kind of thing. But when it comes to African spirituality, acknowledging the sense of who you are in your blackness, in your strong blackness, then you'd realize that we are all one. And so our systems don't differ. The same things that are required when you do umguni during initiation, for instance, it's the same things that you find here in Namibia, and it's the same thing that you'll find in Malawi. So we're not that different, And when it comes to Umdao as well, it's the same thing, which has to do a lot with water, the energy of water. And as African people, and not just African people, as human beings, we've got a deep connection to water, and so does everything else that revolves around life. So even the practices are still the same when it comes to the rites of passage. What we do not have here in Namibia is that we don't do is prophet, or because we acknowledge that Ubu Profeto is something that is inherently African. So it doesn't require a church. What it requires is the necessary rite of passage through the waters, because the waters, and you find that in all religions, and that's what ties us together, is water. And through Umdao, essentially, you get to reckon with your deities, the people who are responsible for our wealth, for our prosperity in life. I come from a tribe where people, women, specifically women, used to go to the Rakana waterfalls, which is literally like an hour away from where we are right now. And they would go and give offerings there. Offerings to receive good rains, to receive good harvests. So anything that we needed, our ancestors had already established a foundation and a relationship with Amandao and other spirits and deities of the water that facilitated our prosperity in life. So our prayers, we were already being prayed for before we came into existence. And because of that contract, because of that relationship, today we are now being born as healers. And because of that, we have responsibilities and duties that we have to honor in terms of, the water, and which is what happens here. I think in Namibia, when you find the Himba tribe, when you find the Awambo, and then when you find also the Lozis, the Suvias, all of these people in the northern regions, more specifically people who are close to water, we all work with water, we're all connected to water, and so we've got that relationship going. So that's the way that I can put it in terms of like, if we had to address the origins of our ancestors in a spirit sense, and how they lived during that time and what they did so that we could have better lives today. So that's what I'm going to, that's basically what the history of our people looks like in terms of the spirit world, that we are all one, and that we all revered places, holy places, within the water and within rivers. When I say water, I mean in general, waters, the oceans, the waterfalls, the lakes. All of these places are places that we consider holy, because those are the places from where we ate, from where we got everything that we needed.
Wow. I love this. I love this so much. And thank you so much for noting that, or saying out loud that these traditions are actually in every country around Africa, because as you're speaking,
absolutely,
yes. So the water spirits in my culture, in the Kalanga tradition, we call that Mwale. Mwale. So yes. So it's just that we have different names for it, and as we're saying, it's more of just accessibility, and perhaps the right of passage having not been practiced as much as they should have been in other countries because of colonization, which is a topic for day 7. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, I love this so much. Okay, so someone.
Before
Okay.
before we continue, I just want to quickly because I'm using this iPhone and I just want to quickly unplug the earphones and put on the charger in case the
Yeah.
battery dies, and then I just want to see how it sounds like.
Okay. Yes, you may do
Mm.
that.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Can you hear me? How does it sound like now?
Yeah, it's perfect. I can hear you.
Is it perfect?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So is your phone charging now?
Yes, yes, it's charging.
Okay. Great.
Mm.
Yes.
Yes, you were saying from the Kalanga tradition and how things were done and the water.
Yes. So in fact, they're still being done today. It's just that we have different names for them. If you go to
Mm.
it's of our region, we don't call the healers sangomas, we call them gomana. If you go up, there's a different name for that. And the traditions are similar. You just have to, I think, just know the different tradition to realize the similarities. And in fact,
Mm.
on day 2, we talked about also worldwide that you can also find similar things. On a world perspective, some people will perceive um, the water spirit as the divine mothers or the divine feminine energies, and then they will
Oh,
perceive
yes.
yes. So the other ones is the divine father, the divine original masculine energies. It's just they are expressed differently according to our cultures and according to how, as a people, we actually relate and we actually connect. And for us as African people, within the Ubuntu consciousness or understanding, we're very communal and we often perceive something more in a communal sense than in a separate sense, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
The most of the times, what you'll find is this that even with there are many in different languages, and it's not just in the African sense. I think all continents, we have a way of addressing different deities and where they reside from. And I will only talk about what my understanding is about water deities more specifically with the ones that I work with, because that's where I come from at Rosini. That's what I understand about um, water deities and how they work. But the most important thing that I needed to point out in terms of like why we are called, and in fact, let's begin now that we know that the history of our people is centered around water. But the reason why we are called, and I find it very strong in me to talk about that because that's essentially what I deal with on a daily basis. But the reason why we find that we are called is because, first of all, we have to come to terms with who we are. There is a generation, a history, and a lineage in every person that has been wiped away or that has been clogged or blocked. And so when you are called, and I think being called doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to become a sangoma, but you have our responsibility and our obligation spiritually is that we have the mandate of bringing the consciousness of the African spirit back to our people. And so when we walk through life, because I think a lot of, through colonialism and all of those things that happened in the past, we lost our identity. That's the one thing. We lost even with, through the church. I'll go as far as saying through the church because it has been destructive to a certain extent. Not to say that Christianity is wrong, the same way I wouldn't say that, Islam is wrong or any other religion is. But the one thing that we have lost through the church is the information that is stored in our DNA. Our consciousness got dimmed to a point where we didn't even know, and we still do not even know who our surnames are, where our clan names come from, and clan names, there was a system in place. And the very thing that people do not understand is that the political system and the cultural development of our people was always associated to spirituality. So, sangomas, inyangas, abaprofeti, abatandazi, all of those people who we call now enganga, or people who we call amoni atari, in our language, um, those were the people who worked together with monarchs. The same way in the Bible, and I like to make comparisons between those two because Twasad is prophet. I went through not Twasad, but like you, I went through the training of Yobu prophet and divining with the Bible. And so I had to come to terms with biblical text and how it resonates from an African spiritual perspective. But you'd find that the kings and the elders, the leaders, those people in the Christian philosophies or in the Abrahamic philosophies were very much inspired or led by spiritualists of those Middle Eastern parts. So the same way that happened that side is the same way that it happened this side. So if, for instance, we have our, what's this guy's name? If we had our King Solomon, who had his advisors and he had his, his seers, for instance, we also had that. And so our systems are so our political systems and philosophies are so interconnected to the spirit. Part of us being called is to revive the spirit so that we return back to who we used to be, to rebuild Africa so that we get to a point where we are rooted in who we are, but not only that, where we can become, where we can actually come to a point and say that we understand who we are, and also we can build on our economies, our political systems, our even in terms of like the law and all of those things need to be inspired by the spirit world. Now, what we have today is that we've got the Western system that we're operating in, but then we also have the chiefs and the kings who still, solicit the advice from, sangomas or enganga and all of these things. And so it hasn't completely died out, but it will die out if we do not address the new generation. Why we are young people is to lead other young people and our children and our children's children back to themselves, back to the foundation of where we came from. And most of the times this will be done, not actually most of the times, all the times, it will be done through people who twasa, people who spiritually elevate. And when you even elevate, when you transcend from the human level of understanding into the spirit way of understanding, the ancestors themselves will come into play and they will teach us. They will teach us where we come from. I remember a time, even after I came back from Epiphany, what happened was that my ancestors came, and I remember sleeping in this house, and then they came to the door in the dream, and then suddenly I went back into the 1800s. And then they told me, my child, this is what we used to use. When people are coming to you and they're suffering from this is, and it was a steam hut, kind of like the sweat huts that you find in the Native Americans and how they use sweat baths and sweat steaming. It looked like that. So imagine by me twice-ing Togozan. So even by me twice-ing, I came to realize that, I've got then a direct link to information. So I would be able to know what our ancestors used to use through dreams. And this is the beautiful part about it. This is what I love about African spirituality, is that it lives through our DNA. And it's not just African spirituality. I think spirituality in general lives through our blood. So it's passed on. For you to twasa, you must have come from people who had people that healed, or people who could foresee, you know. And so that thing, ukutwasa, is a gateway. It really isn't about ukutwasa isn't about, I don't think ukutwasa is about going and then suffering and then your life becoming about suffering. Ubutwasa is a gateway to connect you to those that lived before you. And then from that point, and by connecting to those that lived before you, you've got a wealth of information. When you vuma in South Africa, the term, when you go into the drums and when they beat the drums for you, I remember having to, when they did that, I met my male ancestor, the one, Mukwaita, the name of the ancestor who's present right now. I used his name. And he is the one that came to me. So imagine having access to that kind of material, that kind of knowledge coming through from the spirit world, through your dreams, through your intuition. That's why I feel we are called. We are called because we need to reawaken people's consciousness. And you find it more specifically countries like, and Namibia is very westernized. We've got a very westernized way of doing things. And colonialism is still quite, the colonialism in a political sense has left, but spiritually we're still being colonized. Because if you can find people who still believe that their ancestors are evil and what they believed was evil, then that's already a form, that's an impact of colonialism through a religious route. So now we are called so that we can awaken the children. So our parents, obviously we fought with parents many times, even to twasa, it's very difficult. You cannot twasa without, it's very difficult to get the approval of your parents. So that is a generation that's going out. Now we are the new generation. And with sangomas being born each day, and I really hate that whole thing of when people say, oh, then if everyone twasas, then we would be left with sangomas. And I'm like, no, actually, the purpose, the reason why the spirit is awakening its children is because it's a time for the African continent and for the black blood, the black skin, to awaken to itself so that it can lead and connect to the ancestors, so then they understand, what did we used to work with? What was our political system looking like? And if there were any evils that were done or misdeeds that were done in the past, how can we rectify that? That's really the only purpose why we've got a lot of sangomas mushrooming. So in this point in time, it's a time, the same way it happened for Asia, now it's happening for us. It's a time for Africa to rise and literally self-actualize and get to the bottom of who are we as a people, and also how then do we build the system, because there was a system in place. How do we build that system, rebuild that system again? And it's going to be a transition, and it's going to take a long time, but I feel that's the reason why sangomas are being born each day.
Wow, I love this so much. Wow. Yes, I completely resonate with everything that you're saying. Okay. Hello, are you here? Well, this is another yesterday. Okay, I imagine that there was something wrong with his phone, so maybe going to start sending in questions. But I definitely resonate with everything that Umkhulu is saying. So profound, so profound. So I'm hoping that he will join us. Okay, no, I lost him. I did want to say that everything that Ugogo is saying is actually so profound when you really think about it. I have a dual understanding of dual consciousness of why I do what I do, why I'm always doing these free trainings and free summits. Part of that is really for creating accessibility to this information. And I understand the practical reason why we need to do that right now. But there's also this dual aspect, the other aspect of it, which I later realized in my journey, where before I started this journey, I found out that my great-grandfather was a powerful traditional healer who used to heal all different types of ailments. And what he was renowned for was treating a lot of illnesses with milk. And my great grandfather passed on before, I think it was like not 7, yeah, between 7 and 9 years old, when I was between 7 and 9 years old. And I only realized or discovered that he was a traditional healer. Oh, so you guys are not able to hear. Is that the case for everyone? Are you able to hear and understand me? I do want to advise everyone who would want to go into this path of doing online work that never ever do an event during Mercury retrograde. It's a bit shaky. Wow. Okay. Hello?
Hi, yes, hi. Sorry, we lost each other for a moment there. There was a network instability.
Yes. I was just telling everyone to never do summits during Mercury retrograde because the network.
Oh, yes.
I did not actually calculate this. It's just that last year, the first summit that we did was exactly on this date. So these are the dates that my ancestor gave me again.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I must commend you for doing, for opening up a platform like this. I think it's time that we united even everyone in Southern Africa or from all over the world to understand that we are all one. You know, it doesn't matter whether this one is a Slangoma that's twisted from here or someone who's a Babalawo or somewhere else. I'm glad that we're now in a place where we can connect. Thank God of technology. And I think that's a part of also connecting us. And that's you facilitating the work. So thank you so much.
Yeah, yes. So I was actually just talking about the dual. I have a dual understanding of my path, which is one to actually do the practical retrieving, reclamation, archiving of our African traditions and our African knowledge, which is why I do this summit, and I will continue doing more conversations in the future as well. And another dual understanding which relates to what you're speaking about is, so a couple of years back, when I was becoming aware of my calling and how urgent it was for me to actually answer this call, I discovered, it's so strange because when you are unaware, you don't realize so much of your family history and the family traditions, and it's only when you begin this path that you discover so much information. So growing up, I did not know that my great grandfather was a healer. It's just something we know, but it doesn't click until later. So my great grandfather was a healer who was treating a lot of ngaka yastwana. So he used a lot of like medicine to heal a lot of ailments, and he was renowned for using milk to treat a lot of issues. So when I discovered this, I remember feeling, because the way I discovered it, I had to ask my grandmother and then someone to get the full picture. And I remember at some point feeling annoyed that why isn't this information, like why did my grandfather teach one of his children and then the next child and the next child? And later on, my ancestors, the same great grandfather, told me that, but we understand through African spirituality that nothing is ever lost. You would learn how to use the milk the way I did it through me. There's nothing like I should have taught someone. That information, that divine knowledge and wisdom is accessible to you as someone who has the ability to connect with me and who's working in this path. So it's just repeating and affirming what you are saying about our ability, what changes to us, and how solutions are brought up for us the moment we begin this journey and we elevate our consciousness and we awaken. We're able to retrieve so much more. And as you were saying, are you able to hear me?
Yes, completely, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so as you were saying, a lot of our socio-economic, political, legal problems are consciousness problems also.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So until as Africans we elevate our consciousness and we can go a little bit into that, which is essentially what the TWASA process does, right? Which is to awaken the ancestors and also awaken your DNA and the DNA strands that connect you to the ancestors, that connect you to higher dimensions so that you are able to access this divine information. Why we go through the journeys that we go through during the TWASA process. Why is that necessary for the person who is called? Because often a lot of people have fear around the TWASA process and how it looks and how it's so scary. May we speak to that? Why the journey is often like that?
I think I mean, even here, there's something that I had, like, someone had told, or I was having a conversation with someone, and then, so her view was that not everyone needs to TWASA, which is fine as well. You know, there are people who, we must understand that there are different levels of consciousness, and each of us, we're born with those levels of consciousness. It's like there are times where, for me, I don't view Sangomas as being we are all on a journey. The journey is to ascend. It's not a journey that is physical. When they say, "Ukukhulisa idlozi," meaning that the ancestor that has called you must mature and must evolve so that you can be free from that ancestor. It basically means it's for you to learn and grow and understand who you are at Lozini, or in the spirits, in the celestial organization. It's for you to know that that there are other worlds that exist, and everything that I've been taught is not exactly what it seems to be. That's one of my confrontation. Even before I TWASed, I wrestled a lot with that, not necessarily wrestling Christianity, but wrestling, what is this system that we were introduced to, right? And what I got to understand is that this system that we are using, Africa is, and this is somewhat of a prophetic thing, is that Africa is ready and it's preparing itself to become the biggest state. It's going to become a state. It's not going to be a continent or like different countries. It's going to become a state. And I usually like to bring in this whole thing, or like make as an example, that Wakanda, when we watch Black Panther, Wakanda is a prophecy of how Africa is going to become. We're going to become, again, the wealthiest and also the most powerful state that exists. So that was just a thing that I think a lot of Sangomas already saw. And now it's being put into film. And so there are little bits and pieces that show you that Africa, the attention is being drawn to Africa right now. So we're in a moment of rising. But part of me wrestling the system had to do with a lot of the things that I was taught by my parents, by my family, the things that I was indoctrinated into through religion, and releasing those things, allowing them to go. Because when you TWASA, you become anew again. You become someone who, I remember just feeling like, I remember telling myself, like, I feel like I've been lied to all my life, because the intensity of TWASA, for you to be able to be present in that moment when you TWASA and having an ancestor come to you. I mean, you, like, it's so beyond this world, and talking to you in that kind of way. For me, that was very powerful. So I felt like TWASA is pressing the reset button, not only of your life, your personal life, but pressing the reset button of your knowledge system, what you've been taught about this world, what I've been taught about this world. And so when you go in there, you really cannot expect anything. And because the journeys of each and every individual, the journeys are so different. The level of ascending and gaining, because the more you grow, the more you grow, the more you become conscious. It's like your consciousness becomes elevated and you start being aware of other realms that exist here that are not on this physical world. And so when you start being aware of these realms, you start losing the ideas that you were taught about heaven and hell. You start losing these ideas that you've been taught about classism, about discrimination of any kind, because the spirit world essentially is a place not only of love, but it's a place of deep divine wisdom that allows you to function from a, I mean, it's very difficult when I explain some of these things. The closest thing that I can say is this, is that when you twasa, you become the ancestor and the ancestor becomes you. So when you channel an ancestor, you walk through life experiencing what that ancestor is seeing. And you use the consciousness of that ancestor. When they beat the drums, you go into a state of trance where you use the consciousness of that ancestor. When you close your eyes and drums are beating, you remember the lifetimes that have passed before, and also the lifestyle that people used to live back then and what your ancestors used to do. And it's a very beautiful thing, you know. So those levels of consciousness, they come, and they come in bits and pieces as you grow edlozini, as you grow as a sangoma. And it can happen to other people as well. And I feel like that's why sangomas are here, is to guide people towards their consciousness of who they are as a people, and to also surrender, you know, to surrender. So just quickly hold on for me, just a second.
Okay. Just going to invite everyone to begin sending in your questions in the Q&A. We're going to jump into that. I don't know how you are all feeling, but for me, all my 7-8 bodies are activated right now. Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. You're back.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes. Yes. Now I just
Yes.
telling everyone that you are activating us.
Togos, I'm so glad. I'm glad that this could happen. And thank you to you as well for giving this platform to happen, because it's very needed. It's needed across Africa, across the world. It's a time of consciousness. It's a time of awakening. The whole thing of smoke screens and the what is it called again? I forgot the thing, but anyway, so it's a time of consciousness, and the matrix world is dying. We're no longer in a state of forgetfulness. We're now, and that's what Nkwaso does. Also, that's the one thing that I wanted to talk about, is that you regain a memory of all the past lives of your ancestors inside, because the things are inside your DNA. So when you awaken as Itwasa, it usually takes the first day, and then after that, as time goes, you become the Lozi, your ancestor. You embody that ancestor. And then towards the end, you become yourself again. And then you learn how to maneuver between. You will know when you are accessing and channeling an ancestor, and you will know when you're yourself. But essentially, what people must understand is, especially people who are sangomas, people who are on a spiritual journey to identify with their craft, with what they've been given by their ancestors, is that when you channel, the only reason why we use amadlozi to come to us, or our kwampungu to come to us and speak to us, is because they want to show us something that's specific, whether it's in the dreams, whether it's physically walking through the street, and, you know, they're there to show us what this world is about and how it looks like. And what I can promise is that the older you become as a person who practices, as a person who sees, and all of that, the older you become, the more you mature spiritually, and the more you see, and the higher your consciousness. Now imagine if we had, like, you know, like 1 million sangomas. I mean, that would be amazing, you know, if people used their tools and their craft for the right reasons. That would be amazing, because then people can just, you know, walk around being able to connect with each other from a genuine place, because spirit has no classism necessarily. It doesn't have a classism. It doesn't have a, you know, it just means the spirit world is a ladder. So you're just climbing up. And as we are here in this physical world, when we're climbing up that ladder, there's some people that are already up there. There's some people that are down here. There's some people that are in the middle. It's a journey on that ladder. And that's what creates the difference, or that's what creates the discrepancies between sangomas who know a lot or who see more and those ones that do not. It's because those ones that do not are still on the journey to mature and to evolve as spirits, as you know, as idlozi, and also as a human being, because what idlozi is seeing, they in the spirit, you will see it too. So you've got access to that channel and that link.
Yeah. Wow. This is just
Okay.
so powerful, so profound, so profound. I resonate with everything that you are saying, and so happy for everyone who's here, who's listening to this powerful transmission coming in. This is the kind of information that, you know, I wished I knew in the beginning of my path. But you come, like, your journey is your journey, and it's perfect the way that it is. It was. And we're here and we're learning, and this is so. I like calling it ancestral timing. This is ancestral timing. So for everyone who's here, you are on ancestral timing, right? I love talking about. I love how when you're explaining that this is a letter, this is a journey through what some people call the ascension path. We are ascending, elevating consciousness, right? So for me, I like adding in a little bit of the science because I have that bit of a background. Scientists are saying that we only have 2 strands of our DNA active. And some people say we have more than 12 strands. There's just the whole conversation on that. But like on average, a lot of us, we only are utilizing those 2 strands of our DNA. So you can imagine all these other strands of DNA that you have that are not active, and how that will influence how you see the world, how you utilize all these gifts that we already actually have as gifted people, as African people as well. And I understand, the transfer process is essentially that, activating those DNA strands, awakening all this wisdom that is already within you so that you can access it and elevate. So it's a journey that it is, yes, for the person who, is gifted or a spirit child, but it's also a journey for everyone, really. Everyone in Africa, we are to elevate and go up on the ladder so that all these issues that we have as a continent may actually, disappear, dissipate, be resolved, be transmuted into what we really are, what you were talking about, this deep reverence, this deep wisdom, deep love. Right. So just wanted to encourage everyone that sometimes when we hear this information, we separate ourselves from that and we say, oh, I'm not called, so I don't need to go through that. So you might not need to go through the master process, but it is an invitation that if you are here, you might do elevate your consciousness, open yourself up, awaken with these conversations and other resources, connecting with people, and every other healer you are able to access to begin your own journey. Like you were saying, there's really nothing that can really explain what it's like to walk in the world with the demon, with the Isgozi, with, yes, all the names that we have for the ancient ones. There's nothing that can surpass that.
I mean, with regards to the process of Ugutwasa, I think the one thing that a lot of people, I think a lot of people see Ugutwasa, and I mean, because the journey is so difficult. Imagine, right? Imagine having to come out of a system, out of an upbringing, out of like philosophies and indoctrination that was done to you or given to you since childhood. And I mean, like, for like, say, let's say 22 years. Imagine having to grow out of that. That's a very difficult process. So most of the times, amadlozi or ancestors require us to step away from what is familiar, because what we are about to learn isn't going to be familiar, because you're ascending into the spirit world. into that celestial organization, into that network and that frequency. So part of Ugutwasa has to do with, first of all, comes the whole process of the calling, which is very heavy on a lot of people because ancestors affect and touch, because they live inside our bodies, inside our DNA, iskwama, and all of those things are inside our DNA. What happens is that, just quickly hold on. Okay. So, so all of that lives inside our bodies, and so when we twasa, we go through different rites of passages, and then also we go through different kinds of lessons. And the lessons, when you twasa, a gobela isn't the one that gives you the gift. It's not like we walk into these places with a gift. We're already born. The thing has been in there, you know, colliding against each other, whatever gift against each other, not knowing how to come out of you because it's been in the blood for so long. So by the time that it comes out, what a gobela needs to do, and what Abu Gobela, and even being a gobela, is a certain gift that you're given, because that means you've got, in the hierarchy sense, you are able to communicate with amadlozi, but not only that, with their deities from a very high intelligent place, right? So when a person goes and twasses, their doors are opened. A gobela opens up the doors of the twasa, they initiate, so that they're able to communicate and connect with their ancestors, which is not to say it hasn't been happening before they even twasa. It has been happening. Ugutwasa, what it is about, it's like looking into a mirror. That's what it is. It shows you, oh, so this is what I've been doing all my life. So actually, I was actually able to communicate or connect with someone from a psychic place. I just wasn't aware when I'm doing it. Now you become aware of what you're doing at every point. And not only that, you are aware also of the other person's ancestors and how they walk through this world and through this life. So there are people who need to twasa because they're too far away from the ladder. If we can use that example again, I'll bring it back. They're too far away from that. So a gobela must bring that ladder closer to them so that they can reach out for it and climb. Whereas other people don't have to. Other people already have been born with the ability to access this gift because they're already born as people who not only have the gift, but people who have they don't have alignment issues, if I can put it that way. They are they were already born reaching out for the ladder, if I can put it that way, as an example. So they don't have alignment issues. People who twasa have alignment issues, which is what abogobela deal with, which is that the gobela needs to put them right back into the path where they left their ancestors. A lot of times why things go wrong is because people, it's like you're walking in the forest, in the neck of the woods, literally. And then you decide, because you're now walking in, or in this physical world, and there are many temptations, you decide that you're going to take the left direction. Amadlozi remain right there where they are because they are sent here to guide you into the path that you're meant to walk. They won't go and follow you into the clubs and into wherever. They will stay right there. So you go into this place of distraction. Not necessarily to say that clubs are wrong, but it's good to be in a club when you are already aligned, and Amadlozi can tell you now it's time to go home. But when you are lost, then you need a gobela to step in and then connect you to your ancestors. Then your ancestors can tell you that this is the way to go forward, and this is what we used to do, and all of those other things. For some people, they are fortunate. They were already born with that ability to connect to the spirit world with no difficulty whatsoever. And more than that, you'll find that there are other people who, even after you twasa, because I don't think Ugutwasa is a thing that ends when you leave a petroli. It continues onwards. Again, Ugutwasa is a life process of evolution, spiritual evolution, which is what I'm concerned about with spirit politics, is to have people evolve constantly in the spiritual sense, the point that they reach the truest potential of themselves. But the only way they can reach the truest potential of themselves is to follow the path in which their ancestors are guiding. There's no such thing as a mistake. Ancestors, whatever process, whatever step that you take towards your calling is the right way.
Mm. Mm.
So I think what is very important to always realize is Ukutwasa is dependent on how much the process of surrendering. So there's a process of surrendering that happens in the beginning, which is essentially you saying, here I am, I'm ready to learn, I'm done with this suffering, I'm done with being lost. Because the more lost the person is, the more they suffer. But if they know where the light is coming from, because ancestors, they guide you with the light as you're walking through darkness. If you lose that light, you stumble into many things. But when you follow that light, when you're reconnected back to your light, then you can walk the path forward and then be, safe to say that I'm on the right track and all of that. So essentially, that's what the reason why people have to twasa is because some people have difficulty accessing the consciousness of their ancestors, and the other ones actually are better off.
Mm. Mm. Oh, I love this so much. I think this is the statement I will keep saying. I love this so much. I deeply resonate with this.
So
Because we definitely, so for some people, like the question of, do I have to go through the TWASA process? In fact, I think there's a question here. Yes, so I'm going to jump into the questions. So if you do have
yes.
the questions, please send them through. So Mbadi is asking, so that she dreams a lot about lions, snakes, crocodile, and being underwater. So she just wants to know if this means she's being called. So I want to just talk about how can you know that you are being called? What symbols to look out for, if there are any, for those people who want to know this question.
All right. So the first thing that you need to know every time that you I'd like to talk about this thing. Let's start off there with when you see the serpent figure, the snakes, and all of that kind of stuff. The one thing that you must understand is that every time there is an awakening, a spiritual awakening happening in your life, it's always connected to spiritual awakening. Then you will dream of something like that. But then if you dream of a lion, then obviously it tells you that, you come from a very high place. It's ubukosi. And then also it has a lot to do with abalozi. And also you are a king. And that's in the spiritual sense, you're a king. Okay? And then so when you dream of both, the combination of both is not only do you have a gift where you're spiritually being open, where you're more conscious than others are, because that's how the spirit works. It wakes up its children. So you will dream of the snake. The lion then obviously has a lot to do with your throne. It has a lot to do with power, meaning that you come from Amanguni, people, the old eldest Bantu people that we used to have. People who were either what we call Omalenga or Akwanilwa in my language, are people who were leaders, people who raised nations, people who were, chiefs, for instance. And that's why you will see the lion symbol on the ancestral cloth. You will see it there because it says that you are a person of power, a person of leadership. And so the person, the signs of the calling usually have a lot to do with that. So in the dreams, when it comes to the dream space, whenever we're talking about a spiritual calling, in the dream space, what you experience is your people will come to you. All right. You will have ancient people. Some will come in in the skins that they used to wear, way back then. Sometimes they'll come in cloths if they're recent or modern people. In my case, it was people who are dressed in skins, who are dressed in animal skins. Other times, obviously, you would be hearing. You will have a sense of hearing certain things as if you're being called by someone. And when you look behind you, there isn't anyone that's calling you. Other signs would include that in your dream space, you will hear drums, or you're walking through the forest, and next thing you know, you hear a sound of drums. And then suddenly you're trying to find where these drums coming from. You cannot find them. That tells you that you're being called to become a person who essentially has ubungoma. When you dream of drums and the lion and all of that, that's ubungoma. And then other people just dream of the water, which is very significant for, first of all, water is significant because of what you're going through at that particular time. Whether it's suffering, that suffering will max out. It will be washed away at some point. And that's what water does. Water is for cleansing. Water is life. So whenever you dream about water, especially if it's a combination of not only snake's water, but then you have a lion as well, it's a definite sign that water is associated to Istunya. So you will have to deal, or you'll have to become a person who functions or who serves the community, not only as a prophet, but also as a person who cleanses away people's misery, the darkness that follows people wherever in this world. I'd like to think of, the world is beautiful, but it's also filled with evil. And so when people are completely in trouble when it comes to their lives, then they have to be cleansed. And so you will be the person who deals with that kind of cleansing. You will be the person who has istunya, who prays over people, because by virtue of you being connected to water, anyone who has always connected to water, whether it's in all religions, but more specifically Christianity, because I'm more familiar with that because I grew up with it, everyone who ever dealt with water was a prophet. If it's John the Baptist that, immersed Christ underneath the wall, he was a prophet, a hippie, yes, but he was a prophet nonetheless. So people, and Moses, who could part the Red Sea. I love using that because during the prophet, my stage had a lot to do with reconciling Christianity and Christian concept with African spirituality, mostly from the Old Testament. What I found was that Moses could part the Red Sea. So it already tells you that that's someone who's connected to water spirits. He had a staff that he walked with, and every time he threw it onto the ground, it would turn into a snake or a serpent, So there's certain things, the mysticism of Christianity, that reminds us, yet again, that we're no different from them, or from the Christian or from Middle Eastern religious systems. And so a lot of people must understand that when you dream of water, yeah, you'll dream of water, but it means that you have the ability to see, and that you also come from wealth in terms of the deities of the water, because deities of the water they never have children who are poor. If you go around, you'll notice that they will never be in lack. And families that are in lack, or that are experiencing poverty or anything like that, then you can tell that there's definitely a disconnect between them and their deities of the water, and they've been forsaken. So it's really a lot of that. But then also the signs of the calling in the physical sense. So not everyone will get dreams. It's very important to point that out. Not everyone will get dreams. Other people will be physically, there'll be an affliction of some kind where the body stops to function, meaning that the spirit, one of your ancestors, is unwell. And if they're unwell, then your body also starts to fail. And a lot of people will experience headaches. That is just like a very mild type of sign where you experience constant headaches. But sometimes the body just starts to fail to the point where no Western doctor can cure you. And there are people who I know have been carried into a petrony because literally the spirit just is in a very sunken and low place and cannot be healed. And so because of that, obviously, the person must be taken into a petrony, and then they can begin the process of Mkwaso, where Abogobela, they do what they need to do and feed the person what needs to be fed to them so that they become better. But the signs are definitely physical ailment that cannot be treated. And then also in your dream space, or you'll dream of flying, which for us, we understand these concepts of flying and all of that being you ascending. So it has to do with ascension. And when we look at ascension, we generalize the term a lot of times in Ubungoma. but it has a lot to do with not only your consciousness, but your success. You know, having that, being able to look down, having a bird's view. And also it has a lot to do with sight. So it's a lot of those things that tell a person that they actually do have a calling.
Mm. Mm. Oh, I love this.
Towards, and
And there's also, just wanted to add in also the mental aspects of things, of how sometimes that also might come out as anxiety, or that you might be diagnosed
of course.
with anxiety, you might be diagnosed with major depression. And so that's also because you're carrying a lot of energies beyond yourself, right? All this ancestry. So we do find that people who have major mood disorders, any form of mood disorder, they usually have that spiritual and their ancestral children, and that's they after the cluster process that can just change altogether.
Absolutely. And then, I mean, even when it comes to anxiety, a lot of people don't understand this. I mean, anxiety is not new, depression is not new, mental illnesses, they're not new phenomenons here in Africa. We've always had them, but they've been treated. Here in Namibia, for instance, where I first started with my first Gobela, that was the first thing that she treated in me, because she's called, and callings are different. People must understand that. She's called to work with people who are suicidal, people who are depressive, people who are manic, you know. So she deals with that spirit. Towards. So she deals with that particular, because we know what these things are and how they can be removed. So she deals with that. And that was the first thing that she dealt with, was that I was majorly depressed, and then also I had anxiety. And the way that she corrected what she told me, there's a word in Oshiwam, or a sentence that she used, which was that oneme, which basically means that you attract, when you go, your spirit, this part of you is open. So when that part opens up, and it usually begins right before you twasa, when that part opens up, you start to see people differently. You start to see things that are not there, or hallucinate, for instance, which is typically a way that, I mean, if I threw bones and then I tell you in my visions, this is what I'm seeing, and I take it to a psychiatrist, for instance, they'll say that I'm hallucinating, you know. But when you are ready, when you're ripening as Itwasa, when that place opens up, you become so anxious that you cannot be in a public space. And even when you become a Sangoma, there are certain times when you channel Idlozi, because Idlozi wants to show you something and you're in public, you'll be able to see a lot of things about people, and they can be overwhelming to the point where you're like, no, maybe I shouldn't go out anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So it happens to even Sangomas, but anxiety it just means that there's a discomfort around the space that you are in. That's what it means. And more importantly, it means that there's certain energies around you that are trying to connect with you at that particular time. You will translate it as high sensitivity or anxiousness. But if it's someone who has passed that, they will know that it's amadlozi that are whistling and that are calling them from different directions, because they are asking for assistance for their children. So every spirit guides call out the Sangoma. If you're in a crowded space, they'll call you and tell you, our child needs help. So now I must approach that person and be, towards, your ancestors say ABC, but actually sometimes those things can be avoided. But obviously over time you get very used to it. You can interact with spirits and tell them this is not the right time to interact with this person, because the person's not even ready to hear the message to begin off with. So things like that tend to happen a lot.
Yes. It was, for me, my journey was so interesting because I was, a psychotherapy student having clients, and they're coming in, and my training is telling me that's bipolar, that's depression, that's all the diagnoses that I was, trained in. But there's this part of me that said, but that's not it. This is not major depression, And I could not go to my supervisors and explain to them why I'm not put in that diagnosis, which was so interesting. And we spoke a lot about this, of like just this disconnection. And I also want to connect this to religion as well. But, so there are all the symbols, all these philosophies in different traditions and in different, in fact, from a psychological point of view, when you study a specific psychotherapist called Carl Jung, you could actually see what we're talking about in what he was talking about, like the collective consciousness and so on, right? But in the tradition that I was taught in psychology, that was mostly neglected. Like Carl Jung's theory was not something that was practiced or encouraged, right? And the same is true with religion. They are all the symbolic things, you know, like when we were reading that King Solomon had a dream, a seer, but then when it comes to African spirituality, we don't want to see those things, even though they are available in any system, in any system that exists that is about the holy triad of mind, body, and spirit, right? Why is it that, this is me actually asking, but it's someone asked this also, how do we integrate all this information with our religious systems and also the mental health systems that we belong to, so that we're able to navigate them? And also, why is it that the colonizer came and completely saw two different stories, but when you look at it, but they're actually quite similar? Why do you think that was the case?
I think the first thing is that I've kind of gotten to a point where I now realize that some things need to be, well, I mean, like obviously there could be an integration, but it's not even about Ngoma who must start with these things, who must start with with networking with Western systems. I don't think the indigenous systems so much was taken away from them that we're only trying to scrape at the very surface to see exactly how deep does this thing go. So we are, let's say, pioneers of African spirituality. Our great-grandchildren will be the pros. They will be the ones who know exactly how deep this whole thing goes, how deep the system of African spirituality goes. So because we're at that level, we really aren't in a space to overexert ourselves. So it has to be a thing, and it will come to that point where Western systems must talk to us. They must come and consult us if we're going to move forward. Because now Western systems are finding themselves in need of Abangom. So it's not the other way around anymore. But what I will say is this, is that for the good thing is that as the world becomes more westernized, just quickly hold on for me. I just need to do something quickly.
Okay. So we have one more question before we finish. If you have an urgent question, you may type it now. We have, like, I think, space for one more question.
Okay. I just want to move into some place where there's a bit of light because we're losing some light.
Oh, okay. Oh, we just lost him. Okay, so everyone who's here, what is speaking to you guys? I would love to know what is moving you so far. Today I'm feeling like I just want to be a student like everyone. We don't have aha moments today. Okay, so we have another question from Kanyesa and Busisiwe. This is me delaying time so that Ugogo can join us back again and we can converse. Kanyesa, may I just confirm if the pools are filled up with water or they're just empty pools? Okay.
Yes. Hi, I'm back. I just had to quickly move from the place where I was. It was getting a bit noisy.
Okay. Okay, great. We had finished the question of religion and systems, I think. No? Did we finish?
We were talking about how to reconcile even religion with African spirituality and also with Western medical or psychiatric systems and all of that kind of thing. And what I know is this. What I know is that for as long as African spirituality, and now it's on the rise. So African spirituality obviously will become the in thing. A lot of people will be tossing more. People will be ascending and becoming more conscious, and that's perfectly okay. I don't see anything wrong with it. For people who constantly ask why is it that a lot of people are tossing, we all need healing, and we need healing through whatever ways, whether it's through religion, whether it's through Western medicine or African spiritual or indigenous ethnic systems. It's still fine, you know. You have to go where your faith lies. So if your faith lies in African spirituality, then that's where you need to go. If it lies in, if you don't believe in it, then you must. But what I usually tell people is that if ever they go through something, they must attack it. If they're going through a very dark thing, they must attack it from all angles. And I think that's the only time that Western medicine and also African spirituality and religion will meet. Because what I understand is this, is that we talk a lot, I think we always assume that all Sangomas are Christian, but actually I follow the Taoist philosophy. My friend is a Hindu, or follows a Hindu or follows Hinduism, and so like you find a lot of people who, yes, we are Sangomas, but Ubungoma has a lot, or African spirituality has a lot to do with you confronting your history, your identity. That's what it is. It's almost as if like saying you are at home. At home, you speak your indigenous language. You still take into the village. You go and work at the village for some time, and then suddenly you're back again in private school. You're with other in a multiracial school. You're being taught the Western ways of being. So we live that kind of dual life. So African spirituality is like the safe space for African people, people of African descent, and people who wish to understand the ways of the African people. I think that's what African spirituality is about. But it's not necessarily a religion. I think religion has a lot to do with its organized system. And and people who belong in or who subscribe to the same philosophies you do in terms of like not necessarily spirituality but philosophy. So so I think merging the two has a lot to do with studying. You have to study both ways. The same way that you could study your own language or learn or grow up with your own, speaking your own language and still being able to go to school and being taught in English is the same way that we must be able to, because unfortunately we find ourselves in this space in time where we have to go backwards in order to understand who we are. So that means obviously having to study your African roots, having to study how to connect to your African roots, but at the same time also continuing with the system. They don't clash. I don't think there ever has been a point in time where my sense of, because even in the Christian sense, I've never, and I don't identify as Christian, I don't necessarily attend church, but I subscribe to certain philosophies. More specifically, I relate to the Old Testament within the Bible. So for me, my thing is merging, finding similarities. It's like being with a very simple example is like you being African and then having your Asian friend, you being African and then having your Caucasian friend, you being African having your Latina friend, you know? So it's a thing where African spirituality really has to come to a point, or people have to come to a point where they not only study themselves and their roots, but also must be able to find similarities. What is it about Christianity that reminds you about being African? You know, what is it about being African that reminds you about Christianity, you know, or Islam, or whatever religion that you practice? So you have to marry those two things. You have to find similar common threads and in all religions, but also in all spiritual systems, and then realize that essentially at the end of the day, we are all one, and that we come from the same place, Elozini. We come from different places, Elozini, but we are all spirit beings. So how people can start to understand this thing a lot more is to find common threads. You know, if you're a Christian, you're afraid of African spirituality, what is it about African spirituality that frightens you that wouldn't frighten you in Christianity? If an angel comes the way that it happens in the New Testament, I think, or something. If an angel appears to you, will you not be frightened? Of course you'll be frightened. If an ancestor comes to you wearing animal skins and they had like 500 lions behind her, you'll be frightened. So it doesn't mean that, you know, it's a person having to deal with the concept of fear itself and not necessarily religion. I think it's having to realize that each form, Christianity also has a deeply rooted spiritual philosophy, and which has been, obviously it's evolved from time to time and has been tempered with and has gone in many places. But what I understand about it is that it has origins. And in those origins, it was a very deep thing. I don't think anyone could approach. There were people who literally, if you read the Bible, if you're a person who grew up with it, if you read the Bible, there were people who were running away from these hippies who were just going around spreading the message of the good Lord and everything, you know, because that's how they lived like. They lived like hippies. They went from place to place and they thought that these people are lost. It's a cult. They're claiming to be kings and messiahs and whatever. That's how they're treated. And that's how Abangoma are treated now, you know? So it's about a lot of people who judge African spirituality actually don't even know a single thing about Christianity. They know about going to church, but they haven't studied the nuances of Christianity and the deeply rooted messages of Christianity. And that's why they end up judging, and that's why they end up doing all of these things. But when you twasta and you've got istunya and you work with that energy, you are forced to reckon with Christianity, because in the olden times, that was the only way that we could exist. Or we could push African spirituality was to camouflage it and somehow make it acceptable, you know, and protect it and make it sacred. But when you've got Istunya and you work with the energy of Istunywa, it means that you work with the same energy. So if I had, so this is what the one thing that made me really think. I was like, so then if I have Istunywa, that means that whole time when I was in church and speaking in tongues, that must have been Istunywa. That's how Istunywa, the same way that I was in church speaking in tongues, when I went to do is prophet, that's the same thing happened. So that means that it's one and the same thing. There isn't an actual difference. It's spirit manifesting something that is higher than the human, how do I put it? The human spirit. Istunywa is even than ancestry. I'd like to believe that Istunywa is greater than ancestry because that's what our ancestors used at some point. So if you use Istunywa and you go through is prophet or you train, part of your gift will be that you have to use the Bible to become familiar with the Bible. And they'll send you away and you'll go to a mountain, you'll go and pray there constantly. It's a extreme fasting, the same way that the apostles used to live in the Bible, because they devoted themselves to that spirit, to Istunywa, the Holy Spirit, what now is called the Holy Spirit. But I'd like to think that that same Holy Spirit is the same thing that was here in Africa and still is persisting here in Africa, comes through you and gives you visions and reveals and then speaks through you in a language that you do not understand. So that's how I understood it. And I mean, it's having to really just find the similarities between the two things, between Istunywa and being familiar with the Bible and being familiar with the information that's residing in your DNA. Most of the times we're only frightened of things that we were being told in the past to be frightened of. And part of the things that we're told to be frightened of is to have a voice. That's the one thing. And then the other thing that we're being told to be frightened of is who we are, our name, the things that we practiced. They were beaten out of us, you know. So now that whole history and that reincarnation of that energy, that thing that we feel, that fear, the black condition is always fear for some reason. I don't know why. I don't think tribes, other continents have it, but I think the black condition is really fear, and that's why we are in the situation that we are. But that's a topic for another day. That's the best that I can answer, is to find common threads, is to find what do you share with someone of another race. The same thing that is in that person is the same thing that's in you. The only difference is the skin. So what is it that you find familiar about that person? And how do you make that thing personal to you? That's how you have to study African spirituality. You have to find similarities, common threads. You can start from there. That will just be the beginning, but obviously there are other deeper levels.
Yes. So much gold and profound wisdom coming out. Like my crown chakra is just like on fire right now. Yes. So what's coming up for me is like we have a problem. It's like a mysticism interpretation problem altogether, where with African spirituality we want to take things literally, and then with other traditions we are able to see the mysticisms of it and the symbolism of what's in the Bible and understand it as that, or at least allow it to be that without projecting fear into it or trying to interpret it literally, like with our human mind. But with African spirituality, when people say, why am I dreaming of snakes? So they're just thinking of the primordial indoctrinated fear around the literal snake, the physical snake, and that's what they're projecting, that African spirituality is about all these symbols, all these animals. And so it's an interest, it's still a consciousness problem, like we're saying.
Sorry, I just want to make a quick comparison in that I think what people need, I think also this is another thing. When you become a Sangoma, you tend to see things on a deeper level. For me, reading the Bible when I became a Sangoma, it's not the same thing that I didn't see the same way when I read the Bible before I became a Sangoma. I just experienced a deep sense of faith and a deep sense of knowing but I didn't exactly study the Bible to know exactly what are the undertones, what are they saying in this kind of text. But what I realized is this: in Christianity, there's a lot of animal symbology. There's a lot of times, especially, I mean, there are people who go to church and then they still say the Lion of Judah, the lion, for instance, in that one scripture on that, I don't know where it is in the Bible. I haven't attended to the Bible in a long time, but where, you know, someone was trapped in a den of lions. I don't quite remember who it was, but it was a den of lions. So you find key figures in the Bible that are quite essential. When Christ went underneath the water, there were doves that came out. That's his totem. Nah? For me, my totem is an eagle. So if I find myself flying with an eagle in my dreams when I trance, then I know for a fact that that's my symbology. So you'll find that there are a lot of animals within the Bible that are quite symbolic for everything. And even in African spirituality, you find that as well. So it's about finding the similarities at the end of the day.
Yes, I always, just outside here, there's a window, and I always tell my clients, oh, my ancestors are here, because there are always two doves. When the ancestors are here, they always come. And when I am not talking to my ancestors, I don't see the doves. They disappear. So so it is there. It's just a matter of seeing with our inner vision, you know. And yes, it's a journey to see with your inner vision, and this is why we're talking about this, going up the ladder, elevating your consciousness. Everything will begin to be, I find that everything is more profound, more beautiful, more interconnected when we are within the African spirituality path, when we're practicing it on a daily basis. There is so much magic everywhere, so many symbols everywhere. Yes. Okay, so let me jump into another question. Kanyisa was asking about if dreaming about buildings, tall buildings, hotels, and pools also is connected to having the calling.
Okay. No, not necessarily. I think every time that it depends. Sometimes you can dream of ancient castles. No? But for me, usually when I'm dreaming of exotic places, and usually it will be in another, it's a place that doesn't exist. You know that nothing on earth looks like it. No? So it will be a castle underwater, or it will be a cave. You go into a cave and next thing you know, you're in another different kingdom, like Narnia. If you guys are familiar with Narnia and other like very mystical type of, it's definitely associated to ancestors announcing who they are and where they come from in the spirit sense. So it's almost like if you were Christian, or now that that analogy is kind of tired out a little bit, but if you dreamed of, for instance, let's put it this way, or let me give you an example. So I dream of a house. It's like, a traditional, what are they called again? The guys that wear the masks. I forgot who they are, but they come from North Africa, because that's where my ancestors come from. Togo, that's where we come from. And my ancestor was the one that told me, you come from, your eldest ancient ancestors come from Togo. So those houses, if you dream of that, and I'm dreaming of that, and there's water surrounding it, it's almost like it's a house on an island in the middle of the ocean, right? So for me, it tells me that in the spirit sense, Edlozini, Emanzini, there is a place there that where my people come from. So it's basically is announcing who they are, showing you where you will go to at some point when you transcend this physical body, because they show you, they give you glimpses, not only glimpses of the history of your people, but the future of who you will be in a spirit sense when you transcend the physical body. And sometimes you can go there in your and a lot of people find it crazy and unbelievable, but you can go there in a state of trance, and it requires it comes naturally. It will come naturally, but I mean that comes when you become a sangoma. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a thing where you have to twasa. I wouldn't tell her that, but what I will say is prepare yourself at some point of your life, because there'll be more messages coming through from that place. They'll just showing you where you come from in the spirit world. After that, you'll then start to see the people who live there and who you'll start to know at some point.
Yes, I love that dream, that water and old ancient houses. So profound. Right. As we were talking, like water related to the cosmic energies, universal energies, and how when we're talking about like cosmic energies, there is a history or conversation around that. A lot of that also started up there in North Africa, and then it trickled down coming to Southern Africa as well. And so it's so symbolic. Like we are literally learning our history through the dream world.
Of course.
Unofficial history that we were not taught as well. So this is the history of
a lot of things were destroyed. A lot of things were destroyed in the time that when the conquerors came and did what they did. A lot of things were destroyed. But what I will say is that all of it will be regained again. That's what I'm going to say.
Yes.
Everything will be regained again. Right now, Africa is going through a moment where everything is collapsing. And it didn't just start now, it started ages ago. The last wave of old leadership is going, and then a new one will come. It's already here. It's literally around the corner. And then everything that used to exist in the last 10 years will self-destruct. It will go away. And then that's when the new leadership will come. When that leadership comes, that also means that new institutions will be formed, even surrounding African spirituality. And then from then on, we begin building Africa again. So that's what's going to be happening. And I'm very excited about it. And I know that my children's children will be very excited about it as well. Obviously, they won't know the struggle, but now, because now we're laying the foundation, we're being ridiculed, we're being treated awfully in the streets and all of that. But at some point, our children will know, and they will be very grateful for what we did. And people think that a struggle is that you have to be physically. I mean, there's literally war somewhere in the world as it's happening now. But we have this understanding that when war and struggle happens, even spiritual warfare, when it happens, that it must be documented. We need to read about it only. But literally, this is what's going on. It's happening right now, in this time, in this place. Africa is coming into a space of ownership in terms of its wealth, in terms of its politics. Well, politics that already started a long time ago, but in terms of its economy. But now we're bringing in spiritual emancipation and the freedom of consciousness and free thinking, which is what we had before that. Our thoughts were never controlled. We were not taught to be to think in a linear way, to have an 8 to 5, to have a routine. We had a spiritual system that was too evolved, beyond imagination. And that's what's returning now. And I'm very excited about it.
Me too. I am so excited. Okay, so we have 2 questions, and these questions are around. Okay, so let me start with Busisiwe. So Busisiwe is saying that before her grandmother passed on, her grandmother said that, I hope I say this correctly, okay, so the ancestors who will Twasa will take you through the Twasa process through her dreams. So, but her dreams have been silent. So she can see that the people are talking to her, but they're mute, or she's not able to hear them, basically. So how does she fix this problem? Should she go for Ipekrini, or should she wait for the ancestors to continue initiating her from the
She must go and see what she needs to be given is amagobong. She must be given amagobong to eat, and she will carry this process on her own because her ancestors will show her. She cannot be controlled, unfortunately. Her clothes are too strong. So that means that she needs to find a person who has amandao, a gobela who works with ndao or water energy. And then that gobela needs to give her something. There's something that they give people who are like that with her condition. And then after that, once she goes through that process, her people will come to her, they'll talk to her, they'll tell her exactly where she needs to go, what she needs to do. Obviously, nobody enjoys tossing underneath the water, so I wouldn't advise that. But what I will say is be in enclosure. I'd like, sometimes not all ancestors will want the gobela that you're with. Maybe one will take you there, but the rest of them won't want, because essentially they are too powerful. When I say they're too powerful, I mean in the sense of the deity itself. And when I say deity, so let's put it this way. Obviously, there's a difference between ancestors and deities. Ancestors connect us to deities. That's the way that I've been taught by my people here in the north. But also what I understand is that deities take the forefront. They're the ones who our people used to go and bargain for rain, for all of these things. They used to go and do that. So her thing is that she must go, and then she must find someone who works with water, and also she must go to somebody who has twisted, she must go to somebody who's twisted under the water. I don't think that she can do this on her own, and it's not wise for her to do it on her own. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I guess she can do it if she wants to, but I wouldn't advise. I think when in modern times, you just need to pasha and connect to your ancestors. Let's take that route, because it's easier now. She needs to go and pasha and talk to her ancestors, and then tell them that she's no, actually, this is like a very consultative thing. There are many elements here going around in a circle. We need to have a consultation. That's where she needs to start, because if we now do this lashubing thing, we will never. There are too many things coming in all at once, and I cannot decompress.
Yes, it feels that way as well for me. Okay, so Busisiwe, probably the next step would be to go for consultation or to do consultation to just get more clarity on how to fix that, because there are many elements to that. Okay, so then we have Kyule. So this is the last question for today, which has been a long, powerful, profound conversation, but yes. So she's saying that she learned that her grandfather was a rainmaker and another was a soup maker. And she dreams a lot about water. She's very peaceful around bodies of water. And she has the gift of dreaming and reading physical energy. So she's not sure what to do with this gift. Is she supposed to share this gift with other people, or it's mainly for ancestral healing? What does that mean? Yes.
I know exactly who she's talking about, but she must come and consult. She can either follow me on Twitter, and then I will be able to guide from that point on. But it's a thing, all of these are consultation questions, and we'll never be able to finish. What I will tell her is that she's got, her people are not different from my people. If I go to an extent to saying that her people and my people came together when they were traveling all the way to Southern Africa, they came together. And then we separated at some point. But when I see her, I will know. I will see her ancestor. I'll know what the ancestor is saying.
Okay. Yes. So that's it. I think those are the questions. What we have also is just from Junior, who's saying she doesn't have a question, but she just wanted to say that this is really profound and very enlightening. She's highly activated, and she's thanking us, thanking me for organizing the summit, and thanking you for all the wisdom that you've been sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow.
This has been really great. And I loved it as well. It kind of opened me up to also certain realities as I was talking. So it's beautiful.
Yes. I actually need to later on just process, because so much was happening for me with within my body, because that's how I feel. Yeah, that's how my consciousness like dancing basically when it's highly activated. So this has been really, really profound and really enlightening. A lot of people, I think, they had a lot of questions around this, and being able to truly open up our awareness of how big and how beautiful and how profound our ancestors are, this journey is, and why we're being called. I love this is what I also believe in, but I think that this is the first time for some people where they were hearing why we are called, where it was like from this higher level and higher understanding that we're awakening and healing and reactivating Black consciousness, African consciousness, and returning back to our identity and the olden traditions. Well, not olden traditions, yeah.
And the most important thing, we are returning back to African identity, but we are returning it through the spirit. And that's what a lot of people need to live with, that whole information that, yes, we're returning. We can return back to our African identity through books and all of these things, but we'll just get this much. But through the spirit, African spirituality, we'll be able to get more. We'll build nations and kingdoms the same way, and dynasties the same way that we used to build them in the past. So it's a very beautiful thing. Thokozani.
Thokozani. It's so big. It's so big. I hope this is what everyone is arriving to, just understanding how powerful. On day one, we spoke to Gogo Samantha, and she was talking about seeing this as beautiful. You mentioned, alluded to it, like technology, metrics. It's just so interconnected. I have no words for it really, but it's not what we grew up believing in. It's nothing but that. It's so much more profound than that. And you've been able to open our eyes even more to that. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Togos, I enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else did. Yes, feel free to follow me on Twitter. If there's anyone watching, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I hope I usually tweet from time to time on there about certain things. Yes. So let's do that.
So if you,
I hope you have anything onwards.
Yes, I was going to say, if you go to the landing page on the summit, it's in my website, joymokami.com, Demystifying African Spirituality, and you read about Umkhulu Ugogo, you would find a link that says learn more. Here, when you click it, it leads to your Twitter account, and that's where you can follow. Right.
Perfect.
So let's go back to the page, and even in today's email, for those who signed up for the email, I linked that, so you can also return back to that, and you can connect with him there. Okay. Love and blessings, everyone. Love and blessings. Umkhulu, thank you so much. You give thanks to the ancestors that have been transmitting through you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, no, definitely. They love this. I can feel them, but they're also waking up now, and I don't want them to wake up too like now. It must be a little bit later. So.
I have to tell you, mine were waking up in the middle, and I was like, not now, not today. Calm down. So,
yes.
Beautiful, beautiful problems we have, but that beautiful. Yes. Okay. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Okay. Love and blessings. Goodbye.
Bye.